Hello and good evening to all our eminent speakers and participants in this webinar. My name is Peter. I am the Group CEO of TMI. As we all know, HR has changed, and how. In the last 18 months, we have changed the way we work, not by choice though. The change happened and we adapted as we had to sustain the businesses. Today, the minor adjustment has become the norm, as some are calling it the new normal. Recruitment, training, performance measurement, and every other aspect of people management is being redefined. Let's turn to the future. Big picture is now made up on small units. The micro is driving the macro. We are moving towards mass customization with focus on employee of one. We have with us leaders and thinkers who are managing the change and planning for the future role of HR in the context of micro HR. I now take pleasure to hand over to Mr. T. Muralidharan, our group chairman, to lead the discussions with our eminent guests. Over to you, TMD.
Thank you, Peter. There are a lot of friends here today in this room, whom I consider very personal friends. First of all, a very special welcome to Santrip ji, Rajesh, and KK. All three of them are stalwarts in their own domain, and we are very keen to listen to you today. Like many of them, I'm also very keen to listen. We don't want to appear presumptuous as if we know what the future of HR should be. What we're going to share today is some of our thoughts, and we are open for discussions with you and listen to your thought process. Before I start off the proceeding for today, I want to set up some broad announcements. The first one is, of course, the sequence. I think the sequence is going to be Ravi will be presenting briefly for 10 minutes about TMI 2.0 after I finish my context setting. And that will be followed by Santrip ji, Rajesh, and Krishna Kumar. Each speaker, I will introduce them at first in the beginning. And especially, I want to talk a little bit about the relationship with TMI. And each of them will speak for about 15 minutes. And then we will have some questions in the end. Dr. Santrip is going to leave at 6 o'clock. So I'm going to try and see whether some questions for Dr. Santrip ji, we can take it up after his talk is over so that he will have the freedom to leave. I've requested Rajesh and KK to stay back because the questions are very critical for many of the audience today. Post your questions on the, I request all the audience to post their questions in the chat box. Mention your name, name of the person to whom you want to ask the question, and we will take it up in the end. We have two components of today's show. The first component is about launching TMI 2.0, which our chief guest, Dr. Santrip Mishra, has agreed to do so. We'll have a very short 5-second ceremony on this. Then there will be a talk by our eminent speakers, including Ravi will talk position TMI 2.0. First, I want to talk a little bit about TMI 1.0. Whenever we talk about 2.0, we need to talk about what is TMI 1.0. The story started sometime in 1991. And me and my partner, Mr. Turab Lakadawala, who's from ex-Rajasthan Lever, we are batchmates in IMA, and we started an agriculture business in Hyderabad between 1988 to 91, and we failed. And we decided to quit the business and go back to the corporate world. And we're having a cup of tea, and then Lakadawala reminded me of my commitment to his father that I will not quit for 1,000 days. There was a shortfall of about 30 to 40 days, and I said, we'll stay back, we'll not quit and keep our commitment. In that 40 days, a friend of my wife, who's currently an IAS officer, came one day and he told me, why don't you raise an invoice for 50,000 rupees? I said, what is this 50,000 rupees? What is it for? He said, it's called executive search. All you need to do is to make phone calls, connect people, and you make money. I was surprised because I didn't know what executive search was. And that was the first invoicing we did when TMI 2.1.0 started. Our first business was search in 1991. We've traveled a long distance from there, right? Basically today, 30 years later, I'm going to just show you quickly where are we today on TMI 1.0. Archana, can you just put the slide, please?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, can you put it on display mode? So just quickly, very quick background. We are 3 group companies. We operate in 16 countries now. Our operations consist of 470 plus cities in India. And one of our proud customers, we are proud to participate in Birla Sun Life. 470 locations we hire for them. We train for them in many other companies and 400 plus locations. We have 780 partners, recruitment and training partners. And we work with more than government and CSR customers, more than 51 of them. And we have about 6,500 plus e-learning hours we have clocked on the both in 13 Indian and 7 international languages. The most interesting part of all of this, which I'm very proud of, is our work in the last one, what you see on the bottom, 1.3 million e-learners. Ravi has been working with the government of India to educate and train Anganwadi workers. About 1.3 million Anganwadi workers are now trained by TMI Group Company. And I'm very proud to say that more than 80% of them got certified, and they're doing yeoman service and improving the quality of health services at the village level. So this is where we are. So if you have to summarize where we are today, we are in the top 5 in terms of third-party FLEM or frontline executives and managers recruiting and induction. We are in the top 5 in India. Nationally, we are also top 5 in learning content and learning technology with global footprints. I showed you some of the 6 countries where we are operating. We're also top 5 in India in the demand-driven skilling system. And I'm actually very proud of that, because in NSDC ecosystem, we are one of the few partners who right from the beginning believed the government funding is not an option. We went for employer-paid demand-driven skilling system. We have trained more than about 300,000 people and got them jobs across the country. So this is a very brief story of TMI 1.0. Now I'm going to talk about evolution. I think I am a firm believer that we need to evolve. Everybody has to evolve. The species has to evolve. I personally moved from being an engineer, then I went to an MBA, and now I've just completed my law degree, and I hope to practice in the Supreme Court 5 to 7 years from now. Similarly, TMI Group has evolved significantly from a single product company to multi-services group. TMI Group is completely transforming itself now to 2.0. Ravi, our group CEO, will talk about and share some of the details shortly. So TMI from a multi-services company is now transforming into a people performance consulting, measurement, modeling, predictive analytics group. Second, we are becoming a tech company, which HR automation, recruiting tech and learning tech under one roof. They have become a very, very experienced now in analytics and tech-based micro-solutioning group. The solutions will be focused on how we make employee of one. Why are we doing this? Why is TMI evolving? I think my fundamental belief, and that's the purpose of this seminar, I believe HR as a function also must evolve in the context of major events happening on work automation, remote working, and most importantly, multiple employment relationship. We are no longer going to talk about full-time employees. We're going to talk about gig workers. We're going to talk about part-timers, people working for flexi-timers. Going 10 years, 15 years from now, a large number of our employees will be a combination of these. So the focus of HR will have to shift from aligning HR to business to aligning people to performance, from performance analytics to predictive performance. I think this is a very important transition HR has to make from experience-based hypothesis to data-based hypothesis. You will see later on, Ravi will present some of the ideas. We were surprised that some of the data, which we analyzed data on people behavior, there were a lot of surprises in the way the data was telling us a different story than what I thought from my experience. And fourth, from analyzing what we see to discovering what we don't see. Now, these are some of the transitions which I think HR has to make. We want to align to this new world of HR, and that's why TMI 2.0 is also evolving. So I seek your blessings and good wishes on this new journey of TMI. Now I'm going to introduce very briefly Dr. Santrip Mishra. Everybody knows him. I'll be surprised if many of us in this audience who have not heard of him or seen him in Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. He's a double postgraduate in one in political science from Utkal University and personal management from TISS. He's also a double PhD in public administration and industrial relationship, both in India and UK. He's also a lecturer and reader from TISS Mumbai. He made an extraordinary transition from academics to HR to business leader. 25 years plus in Aditya Birla Group after a short stint in HLL. Elected as the top 25 role models in HR industry in 2019. You are the MD of your own performance and development. That's his famous quote. And I believe he's a perfect example of walking the talk. He has always scripted his position and development in the organization. Santripji, I am extremely proud of my first meeting. I don't know whether you remember in 2000 when you were the HRD network president, and I was invited as a member. Your clarity of thought, your articulation, your ability to take people along, and your ability to remember people and their names has been remarkable. I became a fan of you instantly that day when I met you for the first time. Our relationship with the Aditya Birla Group and Birla Sun Life has evolved from 2008 when we started, and today we are very, very strong relationship with Birla Sun Life. The entire Birla Group. We hope that Birla. Can I request you, Archana, to please put on the screen for Dr. Mishra to inaugurate or launch 2.0?
Yes, sir. I'm on.
You can go and click on that, click to launch.
Yeah. This is us, sir.
All right. Wow.
Thank you so much, Santripji. I think I'll remember this day for a very long time. I request Ravi now, our group CEO, to quickly present in not more than 10 minutes. What is this TMI 2.2 all about? Over to you, Ravi.
Hey, thank you, Murli. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, sir, we can.
Yeah, Ravi, very briefly for the audience, Ravi is a BTech from Benares and MBA from IIM Calcutta. But his very claim to fame is a science fiction fan and is also, in my opinion, one of the best learning science and learning technology expert in the country. He has been with TMI Group for more than, I think, 25 years, Ravi?
Yeah, 25 plus.
25 plus years. So you have 10 minutes, Ravi. And
Okay.
I warn you 2 minutes in advance. So try and stick to the time.
Sure. Thank you. So we've reinvented ourselves many times over the last 30 years. Murli was talking about the TMI 1.0. Well, it's been 1.0, it's been 1.1, 1.2, and so on. And we have invented ourselves many times over the last 30 years to stay relevant because of you, the customers who have been pushing us, which includes the Birla Group, which includes Access. I think when Rajesh invited us in 2012. And then we've been proud partners of theirs. We are partners with Coca-Cola also, KK. And so we have reinvented ourselves many times over. Having said that, I think this is the biggest reinvention that we are doing, where increasingly we are saying performance is the only language that clients speak, and interestingly, even individuals are speaking. And that's where, based on some of our discoveries, we are thinking that TMI 2.0 has to be anchored around employee of one, whether we are in recruiting, training, learning, the entire life cycle of an employee with an organization, in to out. We have to start visualizing them as an employee of one. So what some of our discoveries is what I would like to talk about. I will skip that piece. So we got a lot of counterintuitive discoveries. which we believe, and in our opinion at least, that this is going to push for significant changes in how human capital is managed. It could be in talent acquisition or development or management or even attrition management or any of these places. So I want to share 4 or 5 key ones that we have looked at. Like I said, number one that we are realizing now from our customers across the spectrum, whether it is IT companies, whether it is BFSI sector, whether it is FMCG, whether it's even overseas. Increasingly, we started working with Japanese companies to send people there. Everywhere, it's a performance matters and nothing else. So everybody, interestingly, is willing to consider different rewards and recognitions, different benefits model, different job roles, like Murli said, gig workers or job sharing. All sorts of combinations are coming out there, thanks to COVID impact and thanks to work from home and many more talent becoming available. On the other side, we did some surveys. On the employee side, remuneration still matters the most, including whether they can make the incentives and the performance plays, and brand and job security. Of course, thanks to COVID, that's come up a little bit, job security, but otherwise, brand and job security comes later. The interesting counterintuitive piece that we are seeing is the variations in performance will be huge. I'm on the second point, which I hope you can see. And the variations are really humongous. Anywhere from 9 times to 16 times is the variation between a poor performer and a good performer. So how can any organization actually sustain this? This is actual data of feet of street in a BFSI sector customer of ours. While normally one does 4 quadrants, we looked at our own way of looking at it in 6 quadrants, though that's not the right word. The middle band is the 50 to 100%, and the lower band is this. So if you really see, only 16% of them stayed on to actually deliver value to the account. That means they were 100% and beyond. And let's say we given them the honeymoon period of the first 3 months. Beyond that, they are at 100%. And an incredible 45% dropped out of the way very early on. So there is going to be huge variations in performance of the incoming talent, and this needs to be managed. Interestingly, when we moved and looked at it even deeper, even post-training, the right-hand side is post-training, what has been the performance of the same 585 people over a period of 6 months. And you'll see that many of them are in that band, or the average performance is between 80% to 120%. That's the average performance. But underlining that is all these 580 guys have different charts below them. We looked at super performers, these 52. Even these 52 have incredible variation in their patterns. And all these guys are above 140% of target month after month after month. And that's the sort of variation that managers will have to manage. HR and learning teams will have to manage to see, can I reduce this variation? Why does if you look at this bus performer, he's gone up to almost 8 times the target for that month, 9 times almost, right? And then he drops down to something like 5 times, then he drops down further, then he climbs up again. Even somebody out here, there is so much of variation. So this jaggedness in performance is something if we can manage, then performance outcome of the organizations is going to be significantly higher. And this increasingly points towards looking at people as an individual. When we looked at attrition, this is for a different set of audience. When we looked at attrition, right, I'm on point number 4, if you can see my screen, we're seeing that role induction training, when you do that really well and people get role clarity, it speeds up attrition, which is in our mind good attrition. Otherwise, this guy stays on and then doesn't deliver value to the organization and eats up 3 months or 4 months or 6 months of salary. So if you can do good role induction, and then the next stage is the performance pressure. So if you look at it, out of that entire attrition in a period of 6 months that we tracked, almost 96% is early attrition and 70% is there. So is there a good attrition? Can we define good attrition? Means if productivity does not go up within 3 months or within 6 months, depending on the complexity of the product? Should we let go of people? Will HR be also responsible for, tactically letting go of people? And I think this was the most incredible discovery that we had when we worked with a bank. So the discussion was, who's a good performer? Who's a good supervisor? And we looked at 10 different aspects of that, what could be in the equation for defining a supervisor's sales performance. And it was interesting that 44% of the standard deviation came down to the dispersion in the performance of the sales of his subordinates, right? So if he or she, instead of having 2 or 3 people operating at 3 times the productivity norm and half a dozen people operating at 30 or 40% productivity, instead, if they can be between 60 or 70% to 120%, then you can predict the supervisor's sales very significantly. And also the scored attrition of the people who leave this person and go. So interesting modeling can be done out there in terms of who's a good performer, and data allows us to do this. So the future we see for TMI, and we are hoping that increasingly organizations are discovering this too, that we will have to look at that micro HR. We'll have to, and I'll tell what we mean by micro HR, because if you really want macro performance, you're going to need micro HR, and we'll have to think of every employee as an employee of one, especially the large volume people who are in frontline sales and the frontline sales managers, whom we have done an extensive amount of work recently. So what do we say? What do we mean by this? We think hiring will become micro. Increasingly, we are saying the same CV, when I show it in different geographies, with the same background, with the same work experience, even sometimes same demographic parameters, they're not getting accepted. Interestingly, even from one branch in Hyderabad to another branch in Hyderabad, the same CV does not get accepted. We're seeing this because the customer types are different. So the branch heads who wants to hire them is looking for a different profile. So my standard straw profile is going to keep on getting hyper local and will keep on getting evolved over time, perhaps over season. And sometime you might need a farmer, sometimes you might need a hunter. So we believe hiring will become micro.
Ravi, 2 minutes.
Yeah, I'm down to four slides only.
2 minutes. Yeah.
We think training will also be micro, because based on the experience, demographic, psychographic, what is the past performance, what is the present competence, we'll have to give something that is interesting for this person. Similarly, with learning and coaching and counseling, how can we have one coaching model that fits every employee of ours or every even frontline sales guy of ours? Why would they learn what they already know or something that they're good at? So we need to create, that again, treat them as employee of one and devise models for that. Even the progression path, or how do we motivate them? How do we sustain them? How do we ensure that they don't quit and go? All of this, we'll have to think of them as individuals. How are we able to do it? We have recently invested over the last 2 years, a significant amount of effort in HR analytics, both sides, Tableau-driven visualization, and a lot of statistical analysis, which gives us descriptive, predictive, and interestingly prescriptive. Can we predict what's going to be the performance, and more importantly, say who's the person who should hire, who's the person who can be retained? Data will tell us that if you can partner with customers and model this. So we want to actively partner with our clients to do this. Similarly, on the other side, we have invested over the last 14, 15 months in building HR bots, first for ourselves and now for our clients. We have a US customer now. So bots, because we believe increasingly HR can't be managed by just the recruiter or the payroll person or HR operations staff. You will need bots. The amount of transactions, the amount of data we will need to process is not going to be easy. So we've done some significant investment in HR bots building. And we think a combination of analytics and HR bots, along with this people consulting, where we hope to partner with external consultants. A lot of HR experts are out there. They are our friends. So we want to combine with them, use our analytics, use the bots, and build models using that performance analytics, and remodel our entire delivery of hiring, learning, training, assessments, staffing, the entire schema we are changing. Additionally, I'll just take a minute, Murli. We are working on a very interesting product on peer-to-peer learning. We believe this Gen Z is not listening to old people. That's what we are hearing increasingly from many of our customers. They want to listen to each other. So we are creating a product initially for frontline executives and managers. It's role-centric. It's going to be peer-assisted. So we are generating video. The model is to generate video content from performers. So if, for example, Rajesh in Axis Bank, someone earns 1 lakh incentive, if you can ask him what are those 3 things that he is doing, and take that, combine with somebody else from some other location who's talking about maybe pitching, somebody else about need identification. So we have rich video from peers, which will be believable, which will be easy for them to use. And we're building a simple model called ACT, assess, correct, and try. So we'll send them through assessments, and then they learn good practices from each other, not from gurus whom they think gurus are too good, they can do it, we can't do it. But from peers, they will be willing to learn and improve themselves, and they will try and test it. So that is the avatar we see for ourselves: consulting, people performance consulting using analytics, bots. We will deliver it, and then increasingly peer-to-peer learning, peer-to-peer activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravi. And now I think I am going to invite Dr. Santrip Mishra, whom we are all waiting for. Santrip ji, over to you.
Thank you, Murli. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, friends at TMI. I first of all congratulate you on making those 30 times of changes, as Ravi described so beautifully, through your journey of over 2 decades. And congratulate you and wish you all the best for TMI 2.0. In today's fragile world, not many organizations survive to live through their 1.0, and that you are fortunate and successful and impactful that you reinventing yourself to 2.0 is a fantastic thing that you are achieving. My best wishes. We live in a technological era, and if we cannot harness technology, it is going to be unfortunate. But it's interesting that we live in times of contradiction. On one side, we talk about human performance. On the other side, we talk about driverless cars. There is no human performance involved there. So I think there is contradiction of all kinds that we live through, and therefore finding a final reliable answers to anything is difficult. And that is where human performance matters, because at the end of the day, at the end of all technology where ends, the human beings take over, because that's where the human ingenuity and creativity comes. Yesterday morning or yesterday evening, those of us who, or day before evening, those of us who watched the IPL match between Chennai Super Kings and Delhi Capitals would realize that human performance matters at the end of the day. Whether you call end of life cycle Dhoni, still works as a finisher. So I think the role of human performance in taking the world forward is unceasing. We noticed that during the COVID vaccine discovery process, that human endeavor took to that, and if people put their mind to it, spectacular performance can be achieved even in emerging countries like India. To tackle a new virus is all well proven. As I woke up yesterday morning, I saw in my inbox a Bank of America report, which reported that Bitcoins are the 9th largest asset class in the world, much lower than gold, behind Facebook, but ahead of Tesla. Tesla is supposed to be a technology-rich company. Bitcoins is something that we have never held, nor will perhaps hold it. Many of us have never seen it, but it's the 9th largest asset class in the world. Now, it is so because it is performing, whatever is the definition of performance. And I always believe that for emerging economies like India, productivity is the core challenge. The faster we can increase productivity, the faster will be per capita income growth, the faster would be our prosperity, the faster would be our ability to raise millions of people above the poverty line, give them a decent life, give them decent education, healthcare, and all of that. Therefore, the topic or the subject that you have picked up to create a new business model around TMI 2.0 is the heart of what emerging economies are about, what today's world is all about, is how to enhance human performance and productivity, technology assisted performance and productivity. I think the debate whether technology is going to substitute human beings is dead. I believe that the machine and man, technology or human ingenuity partnership is what is going to bring about productivity in human society and better performance. Coming down to the employee of one, I think as Ravi rightly said, and as Murli introduced it, when everything is changing around us, we in human resources function must change, and we are changing. But there are also aspects in which we are not changing. For example, for long, performance appraisal has been a tool or a best practice or a technique or armor of human profession. We have spent far too much of time on performance appraisal than discussing with people what performance is all about. Even today, I think largest corporates do not spend time on defining what performance is. Is it longitudinal performance? Is it market share? Is it return on capital employed? Is it earning per share? What exactly is performance? What exactly is performance for the front line? What exactly is performance for the board of directors? A lot of the time we have been having debates about board of directors appraisal. Again, if you come to this, you find that most of the board of directors are busy following the Companies Act and the contemporary SEBI regulation in doing appraisal of the board of directors, but never sitting down to discuss what would be the indicators of performance of a board of directors. What would be the indicator of performance of an independent director? What is the indicator of performance of a chairman of the REM committee or the nomination remuneration committee, as we call it? So, ladies and gentlemen, the question is that we can manage performance if we get clarity and learn to discuss about performance. What is performance? What are the contours of performance? What are the different options of performance? The point that Ravi was mentioning, that you could hire the same CV in one branch and not hire in another branch, goes to the heart of this problem. Is to say, what is performance in one branch may be different than what is performance in another branch. And therefore, the skill set, the mindset, the profile, the experience that you need in one branch could be different from another. I have looked at our retail business. We have got 14 different businesses, and garment retailing is one of them. Outstanding brands, Louis Philippe, Van Heusen, Alan Solly. I'm conscious I'm on company time, so I'm promoting few brands of mine. That's called performance to my mind. If in your company time, even with an external audience, you can promote your brands, that is your performance. But jokes apart, when I look at my retail stores, I find that the footfall over the weekend alone is 50% more than the combined footfall in the previous 5 days. Now, when I look at a kind of profile of customer visit of that kind, obviously I ask myself, what's the staffing pattern I would follow? And the answer to that is, obviously, I cannot have a permanent workforce that is meant for peak footfall by the customers. I need to have a flexible workforce that comes in the weekend and meets the requirements. Now, the question is, it is good to talk about gig workforce. The question is, how do you make sure that your gig workforce is effective workforce, performing workforce over that weekend? Then the question comes is, if you manage to find the right people to recruit, you need to retain those who are faster on the learning curve, because if they come back again on the next weekend and the following weekend, those who are faster on the learning curve, learning your product, learning your processes, your billing, your return policy, your customer etiquette, and all of that, if those gig workforce come back week after week and show a differential learning curve, they are my performing workforce, because they apply that knowledge, that skill that I have taught them at the initial stage that is retained and they come back. So who do I retain? Are people who have learned and have learned to apply it. And how do I identify it? And that's where comes the technology. How do I use technology to assess who's that individual who's learning? If I'm taking a gig workforce of, let's say, 30 in a store, I need to choose the 3 or 5 whose learning curve is very sharp. They're picking up faster, that I need to make sure that I bring them back weekend after weekend to perform. And I'm giving that example to say that in every business model, in every industry, there is an opportunity to find out the needs of performance. Ravi talked about brilliantly about the research where the dispersion of performance they notice. It is not a phenomenon that is new. We all know that. Our scholastic achievements have been different. In the same family, 2 children, 4 children, all of them have been different. Unless you belong to Chandra's family in Tata's, my good friend, all his brothers have done well. God bless them. I hope many families are people like that. But unfortunately, George Orwell determined that some people are equal and some are more equal than others. And that's how the dispersion comes in. Now, we have realized long since in our families and our life that there is an unequal distribution. Performances are variant, they are patchy. Many times we have not debated and questioned, why there is variation in performance, even in the same context. The context being non-variant, why should there be variance in performance? If your recruitment selection process has worked well and you are hiring very standardized people, why does it move? To give an example, what is performance and why the employee of one is important? I raised a question with my colleagues yesterday in the context of the retail store. I said, tell me, if your footfall on the weekend is 50% more than the previous 5 days put together, how does the behavior and role of the store manager change in the weekend vis-a-vis the previous 5 days? And surprise, surprise, many organizations have never taught their store manager what is required or what changes in terms of performance for them in a high intensity footfall over the weekend vis-a-vis the stable performance over the previous 5 days. Now, contextual factors like this, if we can capture in different business model, operating conditions, firms, floors, and bring it in an intelligible bite size to the people working on the floor, be the manager or their team members, and create discussion, conversation around what would performance look like, what would high performance look like, what is changing in the context, and how can they leverage their skill and attitude and learning to adapt to be able to deliver. I think there are unique opportunities where technology can be used. But having said all of that, I would again urge that we must think and remember that technology is there to support us. All this analytics will come to nothing unless there is a smart manager who knows how to apply, how to use it to make a difference in that context to that individual or the group of individuals. If we talk more about employee of one, we run also a risk, and we need to be mindful of that and find out ways of addressing that risk. The risk is India is still a country of scarce opportunities. India still experiences hyper competition between individuals to access what is considered to be blessings in life, such as good quality education, good schools, good colleges, good universities. Murli referred to his career in IIM Ahmedabad. Very few people have that privilege. Thousands of people apply, very few get it. So trampling over each other to access the opportunities of life is the natural DNA of India. Employee of one, while has the opportunity to work at a micro level, because of course this is a age of everything micro, micro surgery, micro irrigation, micro nutrient, micro fertilizer, everything micro. And it does not surprise me that micro performance and micro attention draws your attention, and you rightly spotted an opportunity. But the risk is, could attention at a unit level on individual employee and requirements further take us away from our ability to collaborate and collectively solve problems, support each other. And I think every wonderful solution in life, including coronavirus vaccines, always have a side effect. It is natural that as you develop your model of micro employee of the one approach, you will discover through your subsequent research that there are unanticipated, unwelcome, unpalatable side effects. And of course, that's a new human challenge, because then you find what's the antidote to that? How do I modify my product, my approach, my philosophy to mitigate that particular risk? We have a new workforce coming through. Perhaps this is the first time people who are born after 2000 are coming into the workforce. Another 20 years down the line, you will have another set of workforce who would have been perhaps just getting into educational system during the pandemic, who would have simply learned through digital system, never seen a school or classroom. The way we are going, I do not know. Maybe they will learn in a hybrid mode where 20% in the classroom, 80% digitally. And maybe a future generation will completely come digitally. And maybe you are preparing the world for that future, where people who have learned individually without going to a classroom digitally all by themselves in front of a computer screen in their home and bedroom, they are the natural individual agents of performance that would come into society. So I compliment all of you for thinking about a radically different idea, having the courage to experiment with it, bring it to public domain, create a platform of this kind to debate that. I apologize to my co-speakers and colleagues, Rajesh, Krishna Kumar, and others, that I have another activity going on to which I have to get back. I won't be there beyond 6 o'clock. I would love to hear your views in any manner. Murli, you can let me know if you're recording or sending a transcript or whatever. But having said all of that, I wish TMI 2.0 perhaps 30 times more success than TMI 1.0 was. And may you continue to serve Indian business, Indian government, Indian CSR sector, underprivileged, marginal, unskilled HR community, and all of them with your passion, with your courage, your conviction, and your commitment. And good luck to all of you. And thank you for having me with you this evening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Santrip ji. I think, as usual, you charmed all of us with a very deep understanding of the psychology and the science behind understanding human behavior. Very often, I think one of the questions also came up in all this risk of going micro, we become more and more transactional, and organization might become transactional. So where is the people aspirations, their desires, how are they going to be met? These are some of the questions that are coming up. I have only one question before I let you go, which I think many people have asked me. How do we create for a young HR professional who's there in the room, how do they become future ready in the context of what you said? What are the two or three things they should do to be ready for the future among the HR professionals?
Well, it's a tough question. I think it's not just true of HR professional, but for every profession today. I think we need to keep our minds very open and spongy, where we are able to connect the dots. HR, at the end of the day, operates within a social system, techno-social system. And there is, in open systems, as you all know, there is the interaction between the environment and the internal system. We are not closed systems. And therefore, ability to see how geopolitics impacts an organization, including HR. For example, today, because of geopolitics, pandemic, all your talent development plan that involved your expatriation is dead. So if you do not anticipate things of that kind, I think connecting the dots that can be connected, connecting the dots that do not seem to have a connection with each other, I think keeping mind open to be able to combine religious, philosophy, literature, HR functional knowledge, business, statistics. I think all of this. So therefore, keeping a spongy mind is open. The age of a narrow HR professional who only understands compensation, only understands, don't misunderstand me, specialization is needed and is important. But a narrow specialist is not needed. A specialist who is able to soak in the broader societal point of view and body of knowledge and interdisciplinary insight from different parts would be important. And I would urge them to understand that. Number two, invest into understanding your sector or your organization that you operate in. Very often our knowledge of the sector that we operate in is very superficial. I think we need to invest a little more into understanding the sector, its value drivers, the challenges. My good friend Rajesh is here. He will tell you, you cannot operate in HR today in financial services and banking sector without a deep understanding of regulation. Everything that happens in financial services, banking sector is regulated. RBI regulates, Insurance Regulatory Authority regulates, somebody else regulates. There are regulations and regulations and more regulations. Now, if you say you are an HR guy and you do not relate and understand regulations, that's not going to work. So therefore, I think understanding the sector and its nuances is the second part. And the third part, which is your domain, Murli, in TMI, and the new offering that you are creating, is learning to use data to argue a conviction or a point of view or a case, and learning to use analytics and data to design a program. You know, for a long, long time, HR was an act of faith. Our interventions were an acts of faith. But I think people are no longer willing to buy that unless you are able to give a justification through data. You are able to show impact with data. But again, don't misunderstand me. The role of conviction and courage still is there in leadership. You cannot simply be data driven. Sometimes you have to go counterintuitively against data to take a decision. But that does not preclude your ability to use data, absorption and understanding of data. But I think these broad three things, if new generation HR young people can start working on, I think they'll make finest HR leaders of the future.
Thank you, Santrip ji. I will be sending you a link. We are recording this meeting. I will send you both other two speakers.
Thanks.
I'm going to now invite Rajesh Dahiya to be the next speaker. Rajesh ji has spent an early part of his life in Tata Group, 20 years, and Axis Bank, 11 years. So he's a stayer. He's always been a stayer. Wherever he went, he had long stints, and he always contributed very positively to these organizations. And people remember him, whether in Tata Group or in Axis Bank, very well connected with ground realities. He's been a very passionate player in Axis Foundation. All of us know today is a very special day in Axis Foundation. There's a day of reviews going on. And he's always been, I've always been impressed, and I've always been very happy talking to him about ground realities, which Santrip ji, you talked about, India being a nation of diversity. He's a keen observer of human behavior, believes in the power of humility, humor, and the ability to just be yourself. We worked together. I happened to meet him accidentally in 2008 in Tata's second career internship program. But there has been a beginning of a long, friendly, and a great admirational relationship between me and Rajesh ji. He recently posted an SBR article titled "It's okay to be not to be okay." And with his comment, I have carried this burden to be always okay for years. It's both emotionally draining and surprisingly physically tiring. And the best compliment or best comment he got was, "Thank you, Rajesh ji, for sharing your honesty. Your honesty is very refreshing." This is quintessential Rajesh ji: honesty, integrity. He loves to travel by road. He loves poetry, and he's also learning a lot of Indian languages. I know, Rajesh ji, you're also making a new choices as you go forward in your life. So we are very, very grateful for you to find time to be here. And I want to thank you for being our friend. And over to you, sir. I will ping you.
Thank you, Murali ji.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Before even Dr. Mishra leaves, Santrip leaves, I just want to say again from my poetry learning, it was said of Ghalib that he did a great disservice to poetry, that after he wrote, in his times, there was nothing else left to write. So I hold Dr. Mishra as Ghalib of HR for myself. I have seen him, and people will be amazed, for last 20 years. He would always be first in the queue where we'll be waiting at the backside. And just to hear him, I would like to say all 200 participants that what you heard from Dr. Mishra is opportunity for you to imbibe, as I'm doing it for today and for the rest of my life. So we are lucky, Dr. Mishra, I mean it from heart. And thank you very much for being a guide, not only to the young people, but to many like us who have been in and out of HR for different reasons altogether. Thank you very much. I'm also privileged to be here. So I was initially offended when Murli called me a guest. Then I realized maybe he doesn't want to give me dinner, so hence he's calling me special guest. TMI, Murli have been friends. One of the most passionate product called Skip, I and Murli created. I remember Peter used to be with us. We spent endless nights sitting in Bombay House late at 11, 12 o'clock. We created Tata people out of non-Tata call center employees. So thank you very much. That journey continues. And from that, I will try to, as I mentioned, I don't think there is much left to say after Dr. Mishra's talk, but let me build a different context and let me speak from my heart and through some stories. So what's good today is we are speaking in the time we are speaking. This event could have very well have been 2 years earlier, and we would have given a different kind of a message to people. And today, most of young people would have held us accountable that Murli or Dr. Mishra or Mr. Krishna Kumar, you did not tell us how to deal with what we are going through. So thankfully, we are lucky that we will not be, in hindsight, questioned of not preparing the young generation for unknown times. Jokingly, people say that one question that has gone out of HR vocabulary is, what will you do after 5 years, which is good. That was a ridiculous question to begin with. And thankfully, it took a COVID to take such kind of so-called cliched beliefs that we, including myself, in HR have held for so long. So I'm reflecting on the whole concept of work, work models, work frameworks, work approach, ways to work. And then comes the question that we're talking about is work design and work measurement. You can call it performance measurement. But ultimately, I look at in context of work because there are other measurements which can have a different meaning altogether. So let me break that into 3 broad parts. I was scribbling some notes as Dr. Mishra was talking. So one is, I am very sensitive to the times that we are living in and how we as leaders at all levels are coping up with this learning of last 2 years. And as in this previously Murli mentioned, we had our event in foundation. The question that I was thinking there is, we are very happy that we are geared up for wave 3. How many of us go back to work and ask the question that, are you prepared for wave 25th? If we don't ask that question, we will be in the same place as HR people as we were when there was no wave 1. So my first question or a statement of challenge to all of us in any field, and especially people who will have to give solutions and give designs for us to be effective, is be sensitive that we are living into fluid times. And there's only one way, and I draw analogies from nature, the way birds learn to fly on their own. I think that's something that we need to imbibe as HR professionals or any professional, that we need to get more natural. As world is getting more fluid, more changing its course, we need to be agile. And in my 3rd chapter, or in my mind, maybe I'll bring agility and performance together. But my first reflection of the day is that are we comfortable with the unpredictability? Are we uncomfortable and saying that I know what's happening today, but I may not be fully prepared for tomorrow? But yes, as every second passes, as every moment goes, as I come to work tomorrow morning, I have wherewithal, I have resources wherein I can learn and be with the world that I'm living in. So that unpredictable world and agility of human being is paramount on my mind as I start looking at how people are going to be effective in future. I'm again repeating, as on today, I can't think of any professional who can say that I told you so, this will happen. So there's a lot of learning for people like us who now boast of 30 years and 35 years of experience and are used to saying, I knew it all and I told you so, that no, you did not know it all and you will never know it all and you will never be able to tell it all. So that's something which we should build into our beliefs. That is something we should build into what we build, our processes, frameworks. Give it agility, which has impermeable membranes, which allows air to go in and out as human skin is. So that's my first, in my mind, that's the first bucket I was thinking about, that our biggest gift is that thankfully we are today here surviving COVID. All of us hopefully will survive whatever waves may come in, but I just hope that learnings are not lost as we move ahead of that. The second aspect which is coming to my mind with regard to performance, and again, let me speak about individual performance, collective performance, because that's one point was given to me by Murli. So as I'm looking at performance happening in virtual world or hybrid world, I'm looking at two things. At one end, there's technology which is seeking and giving efficiency, which is giving planning processes, the team and Google Meet and everything. It's become so easy that we can just now break into 4 groups and do something and come back. At the other end, when you go to measurement, and that's where I want to draw attention of TMI team, I'm sitting alone here. It's my honesty. It's my transparency of reporting. It's my value system that you will depending on. So never ever in the history of industrial world, the two spaces of so-called systems and processes, and I'm going pre-tech areas of Jack Welch theories, and human construct of character had to come together. And at the intersection of these two lies the solution to what we are setting out to do. That is where the performance is happening, where at one end there is hardwired hardware, technology, systems, planning, efficiency, measurements. At the other end, ultimately, it's in the hand of one employee whose trust or whose reporting you will have to accept for team's performance. So for me, performance in so-called organized world and creativity in a different world where I belong to are at the intersection of the values and the work that happens. That leads me to my third point, which again is almost like a gift which I personally got from the COVID times. At Axis, we are, and Dr. Mishra allowed that we can promote our brand. For me, there's only one brand, Axis. So we are creating what we call as a super app, where we are helping our frontline people get nudges, get leads, get information about customers the moment they walk in. So the focus is shifting from measuring performance to making performance happen. So as supervisor, as manager, my job is not merely to measure performance, but my job is to making performance happen. And that's where I think your 2.0 will be greatly useful for people. Second thing which this does is what does making performance happen do to managers? So the key question there is that managers will now have to play roles of mentors and coaches. They will be human nudgers who will help their teams to move in the right direction. And that in the end brings me to what I mentioned as the biggest good outcome for me. 25 years back, I remember in one of a conference, I in my youthful anger made a statement in a seminar saying that every time somebody uses the word leader, I feel like, as a junior manager, I feel like that nobody cares for me, because leader is that CEO and a CXO sitting on the panel. Every time somebody talks of coaching, they talk about coaching of CEO, CXO. I remember I was a senior manager, distribution, selling pesticides in India at that point in time. This COVID has democratized leadership. These times have democratized the definition of coaching and mentoring. And for me in my bank, my biggest coaches and mentors are today sitting in my branches, not in my central office. My coach is not somebody who's coming from USA or UK or Europe or India with ICF degree. My best coaches are people who got set of people who can tomorrow proclaim best performance from their teams. So these are the three buckets broadly, which I thought I'll put my thoughts around. Some of it is aligned to, I think, Murliji, what you mentioned in 2.0, some of it may not be. Last point in summary, there was a mention by Ravi about salary. I agree. You can't do much about it. You can be only spiritual and philosophical, but yes, salary is salary. The brand that you mentioned, the definitions of brands are going to change. And I'm sure Mr. Krishna Kumar, with his experience in Coke, can teach us many things. How a giant like Coke can make a shift from where they were in terms of their reputation to today a sustainable company. And the leadership Coke has taken in becoming a sustainable company across the world by taking bold steps. So the word and brand are going to be defined by what do you do to the planet, how sustainable you are, and that's where you will be able to attract people. So I just wanted to make that one point around that definitions of compensation may remain same, but definition of brands will change. Brands will be who are accountable to society or to larger stakeholders. I think DJSI, Morgan Stanley Index, they will have to redefine their parameters, because as I see today, they measure ESG on social on employee, on things like child labor, ergonomics. I think they have to move ahead in their journey and redefine what does it mean to be an employee in today's time, whom their superiors expect to be so-called performing employees. So these are my thoughts. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Rajeshji. As usual, you always speak from the heart. And I think you beautifully brought in the concept of human endeavor and individual human character, how it cannot get compromised in the world of measurement, technology, micro, etc., and how organization must blend these two to allow a person with character and integrity to continue to thrive in organization. This is going to be a real challenge. In my mind, I still think we have worked with 400 companies. I think still the honesty and integrity of employees at the lower level, especially as you mentioned, how much of it is accepted, how much is recognized by the immediate bosses is a big question mark in my mind. And I think you highlighted the fact that organizations of tomorrow must learn to accept people as they are, allow them to be, and still extract performance. One of the points you mentioned, Rajeshji, which is what we are doing in Clan, you said very correctly, and Santripji also mentioned, it is not enough to tell people you're not performing. Any idiot can do, because the data shows you're not performing. Your job as a manager is to tell the person where is he failing, number one, and how can he correct himself. So this is the era where Clan is going to go. Clan is going to be a product which is basically real-time, just-in-time, micro-learning product, which will tell people based on the analytics what they should learn. And that learning will be from peer learning rather than from expert learning. So I'm very glad that you highlighted the point that the manager's role has to change dramatically. Otherwise, the way we're conducting business, Today, if you ask most of the employees, the biggest enemy, quote unquote, is the boss, because he has the performance pressure on him. He passes on the performance pressure to the entire Flame employee, and he is reeling under that pressure on a daily basis. So I'm glad you mentioned that. I have one question for you, Rajesh ji, or we will both. Can we hold the questions in the end? Can you stay until we listen to Krishna Kumar, and then do you have the time?
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. Now I'm going to introduce KK Krishna Kumar. He retired as the chairman of Coca-Cola Inc. in just now in 2021, and he's got a very ambitious career ahead. 17 years in Coca-Cola Group, and prior to that, 13 years in Murugappa Group, especially in the Yadi Parry. 3 years in Tiffany in Dubai. He worked across 50 countries. And I think Rajesh ji also mentioned, we are very eagerly looking forward to your experience, global experience, and how we can learn something from that. I am Bangalore, 1983, Hindi Engineering College graduate. But KK, let me warn you, he's an extremely outspoken and articulate, very strategic and out-of-the-box thinker. So I spoke to him today morning on some of the topics he's going to talk about. He's an amazing thinker of the future. And that's why I'm very glad that he could find time. Our experience with KK started with my brother Sridhar, who knew him from EID Parry days, more than 20 years ago. And KK has always been there for TMI. Whenever I asked for time, KK always found time for me, despite his international travel. So KK, thank you so much for being there for TMI. And I request you to kindly speak, and we'll do the Q&A session in the end. Over to you, KK.
Oh, thanks, Murli. And I think it was a pleasure listening to both Dr. Santrip Mishra and Mr. Rajesh Dahiya. I'm not a classical either a HR person or the typical sort of corporate types. So bear with me if I just stray away a bit. But I think people and performance are very close to my heart. First, let me congratulate Murli for this extraordinary journey that TMI has had, and also for launching the new version, which is, I think, very, very important. I think every organization has to rediscover itself as the context and the environment changes. And I want to recall my association with his brother, Sridhar, who in many ways actually taught me a lot of things in life. I think we used to have so much of chat with each other because we were personalities who were chalk and cheese. And I would believe that a lot of my performance over the last 25 years, Sridhar has had an indelible stamp on it. And I'm sure if he was around, I would say this to him, because some people you don't thank in time. And he was one such person. And I want to recall that he was one of the finest HR, even though he was not an HR guy, he was a business guy, he was one of the finest HR guys. Well, I want to really split what I'm going to say in 3 parts. The first part, I will dwell a bit on performance. Then I'll go on to future readiness of an HR professional. And finally, the topic which has been suggested to me, which is how can HR be people performance consultant. Actually, I don't like the word consultant at all, because in all my 40 years, I've worked with all consultants, and I strongly believe that's one of the money you don't really spend well. I think I would say that I would prefer them being coaches, mentors, players, whatever, except being a consultant, because consultant by its word says there's no accountability. And for me, having been a business professional, accountability is everything in life. And because every single resource is important. So I think one of the biggest, I really like the topic of managing micro performance, using technology, using predictive analytics. I think this is something which always is very, very, very useful and very important. But because of the way the business was, especially in India and the emerging markets, while in the developed markets, all this had started coming in because your businesses were not growing, it was stagnating, consumers were moving out of mass purchases and going into more customized products. So all these became a requirement slightly ahead of time. Whereas the emerging markets, because of the fact that the GDP was still growing at 7-8%, and people knew that the markets are going to keep growing, at least for the next 10-20 years, people were a bit lax and a bit lazy, I would say, in terms of embracing all this quickly. And so what has happened now is COVID has really brought in, to some extent, the urgency to do this, because physicality was used quite a lot in many of the businesses that I've been involved in. So I want to first stay in the area of performance. See, the biggest problem is, how do you really ensure that performance is understood by everybody across the organization? That is the starting point. If you want to do micro performance management, the first thing is we need to really define performance right from the top to the lowest level of working part of the organization. And that is something which most organizations don't take time to do. What is the line of sight? For instance, in my sort of a business, the FMCG business, a salesperson has to how he or she impacts the overall company performance. I think that's very important to really define the leading metrics for that. Take what the company wants to do and pass the leading metrics right down the ladder. The point was, for when I used to start my work in many of these organizations, the guy in the field, when I used to work with them, I have worked literally with every one of the sales force in Coca-Cola. Possibly there are about 10,000 people. I can confidently say in 17 years, I would have at least touched and had a personal contact with most of them. Thankfully, there was no COVID, so I could do that. But one of the things most of the people were surprised, were very worried about when they went to the market is, what is expected out of me? Because not everybody's job at the lowest level is the same. We think it is standardized. Like in FMCG, everybody says, I go to 20, every salesman visits 20 outlets. And what's the big deal? I mean, everywhere in India, it's the same. Everywhere in the world, it's the same. But the fact is, those 20 outlets as a context is different for each salesperson. It depends on the consumers in that place. It depends on the sort of consumer behavior there. It depends on demography, affordability, so many other parameters. So unless the person has one or two metrics which they understand, which will ensure that the company can really maximize its value, both to shareholders and to stakeholders, I think it's very difficult for them to really start performing. That's why you will find that the variation today, and I know Murli shared a lot of statistics with me, can vary between 16 to 20 times between the worst performer and the best performer. And this is no surprise, because at the end of the day, some people grasp what they're supposed to do and they perform better. Some people don't grasp, and after some period of time, they just start waning, because once they don't grasp what is performance, they think it's something to do with the other person is better, he gets more resources, and they explain it all. So I think the important thing is that the cream of the company or businesses in any market is in the depth of managing performance. And I'm so happy to see in this version 2 that TMI is bringing in a whole lot of technological tools which will help in terms of managing the depth of performance. I'm not using the word micromanagement because the micro performance, because I know Murli, but all my 25 years of 30 years in senior management, the one thing I suppose I always was told that you should not micromanage anything, because that's not what is expected out of leaders. Even though now I think everybody realizes the money isn't going to the ultimate depth and managing this. So my view on this is, I think we should really ensure that we use technology to collect data, but collecting data is the only starting point. Most organizations just collect data and they do very little about it. I think you have to collect data and use data to really create analytics, and then use time series of data to create predictive analytics. Not only predictive analytics of future, but also predictive analysis, even to the extent of saying what can happen this month, what happened in the month of October, few years back, what's going to happen this October. And I think that sort of modeling is what is going to enable leveling of micro performance. And ultimately, that leveling of micro performance is where the money is, it is where the opportunity is, and it is where the future is going to be for many corporations. So for this to happen, I think it's important that we really have a HR function which understands how to really get in and do this. I think I personally would really believe this is very important. Now, all this is really also quite badly exaggerated now because of the present situation. Almost the workplace has been quite badly disrupted. Even in businesses like FMCG, where nothing happened for the last 70, 80 years, except that I remember when we first automated work, everybody automated what I did when I started life in 1983, 84. I mean, people just automated the same thing without realizing the changes that could happen. India had a classical distribution system vis-a-vis many developed markets, which had either the evolution of the modern trade or cash and carry and multiple channels of distribution. So we did that. But now work has got terribly disrupted or accelerated in terms of disruption, thanks to whatever has happened in terms of this pandemic. And this has sent many people scurrying for cover. Now, physical meeting a retailer is getting more and more difficult. And the opportunity has been seized by many companies who have created B2B platforms. So work has been seriously disrupted. The second big thing is that work automation has become a must now. With our ability to really do anything physical now, work automation has become a must. And the third thing, I think Dr. Santrip Mishra alluded to it. We now have load in terms of work coming in bits and pieces. Sometimes it really goes up and needs 3x. Sometimes it comes to 1x. Second, with the spread of the business, you will be finding it difficult to manage your own workforce. So you get into gig workforce or third-party managed workforces. So at the end of the day, you're going to have almost 50-60% of your organization who are not as engaged with the organization as in the past. In the past, everybody was employed by the organization. So everybody had the same level of engagement. Like we used to have scores of 95% and 98% at one point of time in India in Coca-Cola. And this was driven by the fact that everybody was employed by the company. So everybody had a line of sight. But then now, as the business progresses 30-40%, when you go for outsourced either gig or third party, you cannot get that sort of engagement. In the light of these changes, I personally believe that this approach which has been put in by TMI is going to be very, very helpful for all organizations, especially to handle the front end. And the front end needs a lot of input in terms of analytics and predictive modeling, which will make their work easier. Otherwise, their work becomes pretty difficult. And so this is something I find very exciting, because I always used to do this question to all the people in the organization as to, can't we predict what's going to happen? Can't we really help people with the scenario that this is what is going to happen? So if you do these 3 things, you will be successful the next month, rather than saying that you did 3 things wrong this month, because each month is not going to be the same and each quarter is not going to be the same. So I'm really impressed with what's being worked out. Now I want to get into the second and the third topic quickly. The second one is, and I have for long seen HR as a person, as a function which has not played the role of being an expert in the business. I personally believe in any business, unless every function is an expert in the business and what is required for the business, even if it goes to a non-financial organization or any other NGO or foundation, it's important for people to understand what that institution is expected to do. What are its deliverables to the stakeholders? What are its deliverables to the shareholders? What are the deliverables to the investors? So HR has to really be as much expert in the business as the CFO or the CEO is. And that, I believe, is the starting point if you want to be future ready. The second thing is HR, along with the other people in the organization, should force the organization to look from 2 lenses. One lens is present forward, the other is future back. Because present forward and future back completely need different lenses and hence need completely different performance metrics and hence need completely different performance management systems. So they have to, and for HR to be successful, they have to be fully on top of what is the present forward strategy of this company and what is the future back strategy of this company, because both these will be parallel and will keep converging from time to time and then again diverging, because that's the only way an organization can survive the test of time. So I'm sure with version 2, I think version 1 will also continue for some time till it fully migrates to version 2 for TMI. And this, I believe, is important for every organization. And once HR gets this absolute perspective, then it becomes easy for them, right from recruiting, skilling people, ensuring they have the right performance parameters, top down. I think HR should play a big role what I call is in deploying strategy into understandable metrics. So people know if this metric is moving like this, I'm in helping the company to achieve whatever its strategic thought process or goal. I think that is the second phase, second part HR should do. First, they should be part of the first telescopic thinking. The first far-sighted thinking. Second, they should be able to really translate it into a deployment strategy. And then they have to ensure that the right people are recruited, and then they are skilled. Not only skill the front end, but also skill the leaders. Because most of the time, skilling people who are being led by somebody who's not capable is not a great idea. So I think that is the way I feel they can be part of the future, and they can not only be part of the future, they can define the future, co-define the future of the company. I think it is time HR demands a seat on the table and demands co-creating the future. Because if they can't do that, then they can't manage the next step, which is being really the custodians of performance or the catalysts of performance, whatever you want to call it. I think that's my personal view. Fortunately for me, I have had people who did this. So for me, HR was a cakewalk, because most of my HR folks were possibly fantastic guys who stood by me. So I want to, at this point of time, call out that they have been excellent in doing what I said. Coming to the fact, I think it's very important. I actually hated the performance appraisal system. I have personally gone through sort of 40 appraisals. I have had 7 coaches, global coaches, whatever. So, but I felt this performance appraisal system added no value. While when I used to work with people, all my DRs, I would give them a monthly sitting down and say what's going right, what's not going right, and what we should be doing. And I personally don't like to sit on judgment on anybody. Now, I go back to what both Rajesh Daya and Dr. Santrip Mishra said. We have to ensure that we are running with the person in terms of ensuring performance. And if we don't see that person really reacting to or relating to what we are doing, then we should really possibly split ways, rather than really wasting that person's time for 3-4 years and then saying you've not really done your job. So I believe the new approach, based on whatever technology and inputs we get, should be something like a very seamless, continuous, it is called, I think, performance enablement. I think that's the right jargon, a system where you really work with people at the micro level and ensure that they know literally every week that they are in the right direction or not in the right direction. And we do everything that will help from an organizational perspective, but also everything that will help from the individual perspective, where they have to make changes or they have to get skilled. Because that's the right approach. Because I think micro approach is not only micro in terms of the level of the organization, but I believe it should be micro even in terms of the time. I think everybody's time is precious. It's not just the organization's time. So it's important for us to literally give a weekly feedback or a 15-day feedback or a monthly feedback. I know when I was in the front end in those levels, I would speak to my team of 150 people once a week, individually, literally. Even though the STD was not easy, it was like phone calls was much more difficult than this. But that is the only way by which you can ensure that this data can be put to good use. This analytics can be put to, there's no point in having a predictive model and then you tell them at the end of the month, hey, this is what was the predictive model and this is what you've done. I've seen many organizations where they just keep it as a toy. It should not be a toy. It should be something you do on a regular basis. For me, I think the ultimate role HR can play, I would really sort of summarize it. And then I will give you 1 or 2 examples if I have the time, Murli. Otherwise, I'll summarize it and close it. I think the first thing the HR, as I have already explained, the macro stuff the HR person should do. But the micro stuff is really understand what is expected in terms of the metrics to be delivered and ensure that the right person is put into that job under the right leader. And why I am saying this, it's very important because, and you have to jointly skill the leader and the person to be able to deliver that performance. And then you keep monitoring it on a continuous basis and course correct. You don't have to go to people who are on the right course every week or every month. You can leave them alone. You go to the people who need the correction, which means you are talking about 10-15% of the total people whom you have to connect. Because if you connect, then it will really, you will really win. So I think this is what I would say, and I would just give one example so that you relate to whatever I have said. For instance, in one of my assignments, I'll give you one example which happened in India. It was the state of Gujarat. Actually, we were doing very badly, and we were surprised because it just goes into what Murli was saying. We had one part of the state where we had a market share of somewhere around 70%. And then we had two parts of the state where our market share was 4%. And when we looked at the team, all the team members had spent 7 to 10 years in the business. They knew the business. Some of them had worked in the 70% area and moved to the area where it was 6%. But we found for almost 10 to 12 years, it had deteriorated, and this was the situation. So I think we were continually changing people, thinking that people were the problem. But I'm not a guy who likes to fire people. So we were just changing people from one region to the other, but getting them into Gujarat. But the failure was happening. Then when we went in, I think this is what we did exactly what is being done with technology now manually. I always believe if you torture data, it gives you the truth. And then it gives you models and everything. But if you don't torture the data and use the data to explain your point of view, it doesn't tell you anything. So when we really torture the data, we found in the other two parts of the state, we had a completely different competition set. We had a completely different demography of people. And we were just doing the same thing we were doing in the 70% two territories, and it was not working. So we were able to enable the performance of people there by reworking the way we should approach these places. And believe it or not, at an overall level, that territory used to be at about 14-15%, as you would imagine, went up to 70%. Everybody came up, and we had this concept which TMI is talking about, where everybody performed equally. One part is the fact that we have to ensure that we enable performance, which is skilling, ensuring we give the right business tools for the person to be successful. The other is to getting the right skills into the person, and also ensuring we give sufficient motivation by giving them line of sight to what they're doing for the company. I think when these two come together, I believe you get more even performance than this sort of distributed performance. So I want to finally close with this fact. See, I'm a strong believer. I know that this topic about it's performers who create business. I agree with that. But the fact is, it's people who are performers. See, even today, you can't open a computer and win a market share in FMCG company in any part of the world. You have to really go in and get people trained to read your models, to understand your models, go and execute it, and then you have to win it. So I personally believe that I'm a strong believer that every person is pretty good, because your selection process, you have gone through what is required. If you've done it well, then every person who comes into you is very good. And it is the company with its performance management process. I don't like this word appraisal, performance management or performance enablement process, which makes them successful or not successful. Now, having seen what this version 2 is, I feel this can go a long way in enabling this performance enablement process well, and ensure that people are successful, even if they stay for a short while. Thank you, Murali, for the opportunity. And this is what I had from you. Thanks.
Wonderful. KK, I think we are so lucky today. 3 of the speakers have spoken from the heart. We've always requested speakers not to posture, because sometimes you want to talk to an audience just to be heard or be liked. But I love all 3 of you for taking the time out and sharing your thoughts. But KK, I want to just comment on one part you mentioned, and I think all of us are summarizing and going towards the solution. First is performance modeling is a must. Performance modeling is all about cause and effect. What are the patterns of performance? How do you summarize from pattern across multiple regions? What can you learn from another region? And so on. So first is performance modeling. The second part, all of us are agreeing with, we have to co-create performance. Individuals cannot create performance, bosses cannot create performance. It is the job of HR, the business leaders together. We have to co-create the performance. Today, at the end of the day, why I put employee of 1, I felt, I've been in the industry for 30 years, somewhere in aligning HR to business, we have forgotten the individual. As you said, all of us agreed in this room that the individual who drives the business at the end of the day. By creating a lot of levels, by creating a lot of aggregation of data, we have forgotten the individual. So that I think I'm very happy that all of us are on the same page, that he is important. We need to enable him to succeed. That is our job. And we need to create measurements and modeling to understand which button to press for each person so that he can succeed. I think this is the summary, what I've heard from today. I'm going to ask one or two questions because the time is still very short. First question I'm going to ask is to Rajesh. Rajesh, this question is about routine jobs. The question is, as routine jobs are getting automated, workforce is expected to become more experts. Now, if there's such a large productivity variation exists even among experts, what measures should HR take? The assumption normally we make is that people are not trained, we can train them better. But even experts, if there's a wide variation, what can HR do? That's the question which has come. Over to you, Rajesh.
So again, these are, I'll admit these are not easy questions, but let me take a real life example of audit. And I'm taking a financial services example where you'll know the importance of audit. We will have, in a bank of our size, we'll have 600 people. And these are senior people, responsible people. And yes, lots of what auditors used to do usually is getting automated because data is centralized. There are now AI ML tools which can go through multiple records and through aberrations or variances very easily. So at one end, the question may be that there is no need for anyone to go to a branch and go through vouchers and papers. It's easily available. A click of a button, it's either there or it can be extracted in a millisecond of what usually would take. But when I look back, and as we started our journey of automation in audit in Access, we realized that it is not about doing away with repetitive jobs. It's about enlarging the intelligence that lies in that data. So manually going to a branch, looking at a voucher and finding a variation because the connecting entry is not there would take lots of time. But suddenly the same things are getting built into our early warning signals. These data points are getting consolidated and our auditors are becoming data scientists who put all these patterns in front of them and are able to predict the risk rating of every branch to a very granular level on a daily basis. So I'm a strong votary of not jumping or throwing. This can be automated. So let's get the people out and put a machine here. And this same conversation we had 25 years back when robots came into our factories. I remember in chemical factories, we had automation of a different nature altogether. So there is still an opportunity to enhance quality of work by doing more and more, do away with repetitive clerical work, create opportunities for value-adding propositions. Is my message. I can take example in any field. You do recruitment, and the way you have done that through automation in terms of efficacy of people joining, efficacy of their productivity is a real example. You're not thrown people out. You have put different people to different use. So I think we got miles to go before we say that yes, machines can replace human beings, and we need to face the challenge.
Thank you, sir. I think this is for KK. KK, the customer is also changing rapidly and getting more differentiated compared to earlier. For example, many used to drink Coke, and now each one drinks his own special drink. How should the frontline executive be equipped to manage the changing customer in the marketplace? KK, over to you.
This is an excellent question, but I think this is a work in progress really for most companies because the world is, this is good in the good question because the world is moving from a situation where everybody wanted a standardized product, which is good, and is to everybody wants very, very specialized products. Now, it's done in two ways. One is every company tries to create more differentiation, creates a range of products which satisfy every consumer needs. But also technology is used, and I can talk about a technology which Coca-Cola uses in the US, where with it's a machine which is AI enabled, etc., which can deliver about 400 beverages. You can go and store the type of beverage you want, which can be a mix of Coke and Sprite and Fanta and some juice and whatever it is. And the next time it senses your mobile, it will serve the drink to you. So technology is being used to ensure that they develop this capability. And I think I've read this experience of Asian Paints also, where they have created a machine which can give you any shade you want. You can increase or decrease it. So technology is going to be used. And what is going to happen is some type of distributed manufacturing will evolve, where the salesperson will be equipped to go and sell a solution and not a product. They will possibly sell a machine which can give, say, 500 options, because the retailer cannot stock 500 options, which will be made with 4 or 5 cartridges. Like this is happening in every industry. People are using technology to deliver that. So I would call this as a solution and not a product range. So this is something which is evolving across the world. And in India, I think the person who's really pioneered it is Asian Paints and Paints.
Yeah, thank you, KK. Before I go to the next question, I'm going to ask people to fill up the feedback form because these feedback forms are very useful for us to make this more and more meaningful. Please take time out. The link is in the chat box. Please respond to that. Now, I'm going to go back to the next question for Rajesh ji. Rajesh ji, this question is about people. One of the biggest challenges we find about people is that people don't like to be measured. And as we go into the world of more and more micro measurement, more and more detailing measurement, there is going to be a lot of resentment, and people don't like to be called out. There's a measurement on the output side, measurement on the input side. How do we manage this? I think this is one of the questions in the context of larger quantum of measurement and micro measurement. Over to you, Rajesh.
So, Murliji, I think Dr. Mishra alluded to that. It's the whole notion that people don't want to get measured hinges on how does one measure them. None of us want somebody to be watching a camera standing on our head and 24 hours we being watched for each activity. That's true. Secondly, not the systems not being sensitive. And you mentioned that what happens in a branch does not happen in another branch. What's true for one geography may not be true. So having multiple challenges is reality for people. I again, going back to the same point, today, sadly, one area where I think we have misused technology is our performance management systems. These have become so mechanical. There are 20 KRAs, and every morning, the moment I log in, first thing is flash my performance in front of me, saying that I'm 3 meters behind my line and all that. And there is no human interface. There is not even a discussion. So either we need to move to more evolved technologies, where there is a parallel system which is also explaining rationale and then converting that into how to do performance, as I mentioned earlier. Or maybe, as you mentioned earlier, if more and more is getting automated, the people who are getting free, they should be mentors. They should be performance coaches. HR should reinvent another vertical. I don't know. We have a PMS department, which is only 4 or 5 people. In a large company also, take the largest company and ask how many people they have in a performance management department, not more than 4. And they will have 40 people in recruitment. Change this paradigm, because your existing people are more than what you're going to hire. The performance of your existing people is more important than what you're going to do with new hires. But still, HR department will put all their energy into hiring and not into performance management. So I will strongly vote for saying have performance coaches who will be there on the screen when I'm looking at my performance every day.
Thank you. KK, thank you so much. I got your message. You've been a very, very great help, and we will be in touch. Please carry on. KK has to go for another meeting. So Rajesh ji, 1 or 2 more questions for you, and then we'll wind up. Thank you, KK. Yeah.
Thank you.
Rajesh ji, this question is very interesting too from your standpoint. One is, you talked about learning multiple languages. I talked about you like to learn a lot of Indian languages. One of the question to you is, knowing multiple Indian languages, how are they beneficial to HR people? In what way has it helped you, and how can it help?
So again, I will be foolish if I say that it will help me understand people in. I'm learning Kannada, so idea is not to go to Bangalore branch and start interacting with. It's learning language is a mental process. It's not a language alone. Somebody has told me, it's been proven, riding a bike, doing maths, basic primary maths question, and learning a language makes your mind agile. So this is a self-training program to stay agile. For me, it's not to do with what I'll do with that language. It's something which is almost like a crossword that you may prefer. I prefer a language route to keep my mind fresh and agile.
Thank you. I think we're going to stop here. Ravi, would you like to summarize some thoughts based on whatever has happened today, and we can then wind up for the day? Over to you, Ravi. You are muted, Ravi.
So I think this is one of the finest webinars we have hosted for a while now, because huge amount of food for thought. I believe we opened up a Pandora's box for ourselves and for anybody else who attended it today. I guess the bottom line is everybody is now performance focused, and I think what all the three people spoke about is, do we know what that performance means? We, as in that individual role holder, does he know what that performance means? What's good performance? What's bad performance? How are others performing? What's the gap between me and them? And why are they performing? And why am I not able to perform? How is that measured? And what is the tools that are available for me to shape up? I also like what Rajesh ji just said about so much of effort going behind recruitment. And then anyway, they're going to try. Early attrition is 20-30% in the first 90 days because that guy doesn't know how to perform that job role and he cuts and runs anyway, right? Or you ask him to go anyway. So there is a repetition of work for HR. So I think a lot of interesting points have come. Is it going to be easy for us? I'm going to be a little selfish to think that through. Is it going to be easy for us in terms of walking this path of micro HR? No, it's going to be very tough. We also get that message loud and clear. The tech is not going to be the only piece of solution. It's also about understanding that tech with the context wrapper, because that context is going to change maybe as much as pin code to pin code, if not state to state or city to city. It might even be at pin code level, right? It's also about, I guess, organization culture. We didn't speak about it at all. I've been thinking about it now. Imagine we create something along with Axis Bank, and for Axis Bank usage, it might not work in a Kotak Bank or an RBL Bank or a smaller bank. So it's going to be also organizational culture context. And with more and more of gig workers coming in, how do we balance out keeping them on, getting that performance out of them? I think many questions are opened out. A lot of food for thought. I think that's my huge takeaway for today. Some part, I think we are on the right track. Some part, we will go back to the drawing board and reflect on what has been raised today by the three experts and remodel ourselves. So thank you very much to Dr. Mishra, to Rajesh ji and KK. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Then I think I'm going to wind up the whole session by saying only one thing, Rajesh ji. You have really put the nail on the head that HR now has to own, co-create ownership, co-create solutions for performance. And that is not going to come from top down. It has to be created partly by participation with people at the business end. HR has to learn a lot more of business to be able to understand the ground realities, what the flame worker faces. And I think the last point, I think where Flame, our own product clan, which I've been working on, Rajesh ji, for the last 1 year, It's basically ultimately the boss's job is not to tell people what they're not doing. It's not enough to say you're not performing. If you do not tell them what they should do to improve, I think you're unfit to be a boss. And to do that, you need a lot of detailing on the job, detailing, understanding the role. You need to understand the context. You need to understand what works and what doesn't work. And that is what leadership is. Leadership is helping people succeed. And you can help them succeed only by pointing the right direction. And with that, I am going to close this session. I think a wonderful audience. We have had more than 100 plus audiences. And I think we're going to have a last vote of thanks by Peter Bellum. Peter, over to you. And I want to thank the audience and again for wonderful. I think we had more than 160, 170 at the peak time. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you, TMD, for anchoring the webinar. I think it generated a lot of fruitful ideas from the really eminent panel of speakers. They shared their insights, some experiences from their organization. And like BR said, it is a lot of food for thought. Thank you, Dr. Santrip Mishra, Rajesh Daya sir, so good to see you. Mr. Krishna Kumar and BR for your valuable time and thoughts. Wish you all and all our webinar participants happy Navaratri and a great year ahead. All the best.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.